Hey homeschool friends, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to another homeschool update video. This one's going to be for September, where I have a number of changes. All in all, everything's really pretty good. I will catch you up a bit on some of our changes with language arts, as well as chores, as well as like family exercise, pre-reading books. I have kind of a whole hodgepodge of things I'm going to be talking about in today's video, but I'm also going to be covering the normal stuff like life updates, family subjects, individual subjects, all of those things I will be chatting about in today's video. So hi, my name is Angie. Welcome to the channel if you are new here, or welcome back if you have been coming for a while. And like I said, we are going to be talking about our September homeschool update. And if you like these videos, these update videos, please consider giving the video a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel if you want to. It really does help my channel. But otherwise, let's hop in. I always start with life updates. So things are honestly pretty good. As for like my husband's health, which I know a lot of you have been praying for that, he's doing really well. He's kind of in a stable spot. We're on a path forward and we'll kind of see where that goes. But I do appreciate all the prayers for that. And as you will see as you watch the rest of this video, homeschooling is starting to even out. We are starting to really get into a good routine, which I just love. When that happens, it tends to kind of free up my mental space, my time, all these things. So I'm really wanting to get back into kind of eating healthy and exercising more consistently. I will do it. I'm just not very consistent, and I just want to feel a little bit healthier. So that's kind of on me. That's a life update for me, which has also kind of resulted in us doing a little bit more like family exercise. So this is very small potatoes. So what I mean by this is that my twins go to preschool twice a week in the afternoons, and what we've started doing is the four of us, me and my four kids, will walk down the hill to take them to preschool. It's about a 0.8 mile walk to get there, and then we will walk back. And it's just been really nice. What I have found is it just kind of slows us down. It gets us outside. It gets like a significant break around noon, because we still usually do a little school in the afternoon, usually writing or something like that. And so I have found it to be really life-giving to be taking these walks with my kids, even though I sometimes feel like I have to drag my twins behind me, but sometimes they're all for it. So that has been really fun. And then chores. Oh my gosh, I feel like we are getting into a rhythm with chores. I feel like chores are always trial and error. You can always set out the ideal thing you would want your kids to do, and then the reality kind of falls out from there, which I think is a fine process for figuring out your chores. I have to structure chores in a way that is manageable, that doesn't take me doing all the reminding and heavy lifting and trying to keep track of things and check a bunch of boxes or all that stuff. That's too much. But I have found ways to kind of slide it into our normal routines, and it's just kind of like a peg on the week, if that makes sense. And so I do have a video coming about like my non-homeschool routine, where you're talking like chores and working out and all the things I do, all the things I have my kids do. So I will be sharing that soon, but I have found that it has started to kind of level out. So I'm ready to share now that it feels more consistent. So all of that life stuff really does affect our homeschool day. But let me just jump into exactly how our homeschool has been going. And I typically like to start with family subjects. So with Sunlight History, Bible, Literature. So history has been going really well. We're still very much in Egypt time frame, so we're doing ancient history. And I have a book to share with you. This is Around the World with Kate and Mac, a look at languages from A to Z. So what this does is it highlights a specific language, and it talks about that area of the world, that people group, but it is published by Wycliffe, so the Bible translator. So it talks a lot about bringing God's word to different people groups. So it is really cool, especially as it's been paired with our latest read aloud, which I'll show you, which is a missionary story. And so my kids have just been really interested and excited by learning about different people groups, as well as how people have tried to reach them with the gospel. So I love it. And then the other book, which I don't think I shared this last time either, because it's the one that we've been using mostly this past month, but we've been using it quite a bit. And it has 4 different time frames: medieval time, Viking Age, Roman world, and ancient Egypt. So basically we skip the first 3 quarters and we're in the ancient Egypt. What I like about this book, as opposed to the Usborne World History book, which I showed in the last video, is this is told slightly in story form. So what you're doing is you're following this kid who time travels in time, but it also tends to follow like a family. So in the Egyptian section is like following Nakut and his family. And so it adds like people to the story, which I kind of appreciate because it is still very much an Usborne style of book with lots of different cool pictures and snippets of information. And so we are liking this book quite a bit. My kids really enjoy it. And so history's going really well. As for Bible, that's going great. We're memorizing verses. We're reading this book still, which I have talked about in a number of videos. This is the book from the older version of HBLB, but I actually like this better than what's in there currently, which is theology. But I have found this has actually resulted in better conversations, even though it looks older and it's not as cool looking as theology. I've been really enjoying some of the conversations this has brought up, just some basic foundational conversations that are really good to have with my kids. I will find some of their misconceptions about different things about what Jesus did or how God views sin or whatever it is, that as I'm reading this or we're talking through it, we can discuss that. And so that's been really good. Oh, and before I get to the literature, let me talk about science. So we are still using this DK Find Out Earth book. I talked about it last time. It's not my favorite. It's still not my favorite. I usually like DK books, but a lot of the pages have been kind of hit or miss in that one, but that's fine. We're still enjoying the topics. We're really enjoying the science experiments. And I have said that before, it's probably my favorite part about the sunlight science. But I think I'm going to be planning a video where I take you guys through kind of a month of the experiments. So kind of 4 different experiments. I'll show you kind of how it works and things like that, just in case you are interested in the sunlight science, because I feel like the experiments really highlight the program. Okay guys, you know how much I love the sunlight literature. So for sunlight, we finished up Homer Price. I talked about this last time because we were kind of halfway through it. It's just a very cute, classic sort of book where there's, I believe, 6 different stories that are set in chapter form about this boy named Homer and his town of Centerburg. And they're just really wholesome and sweet and funny, and the kids enjoyed them. And they had no problems tracking, and the language wasn't too old-fashioned for it to not be entertaining. So it was very fun. And then this is the current book we're working through. I think we'll finish it today, maybe tonight. And it's called Catching Their Talk in a Box. It's missionary stories by Betty M. Hockett. This one is about Joy Riderhoff, which was the woman who started a gospel recordings business, basically, where she would just travel all over and record the gospel message in different languages and different people groups, usually some very remote people groups. It is a very inspirational story, and I feel like it is a perfect intro into missionary stories because it is not very violent or scary in any way. She is literally just following God's lead, and she is very trusting and like starting things without money or without a car and just being like, God will provide. And every time he comes through, and it's just really neat to be able to discuss that with my kids and to have that example of like faithfulness. So I've been really enjoying this, and my kids have too. It's definitely not as entertaining as some of the books we read, but my kids can handle both really entertaining books like this one. We finished this one. So Tuesdays at the Castle. This is by Jessica Day George. Is really cute, you guys. I've talked about it for a number of videos, so I'm not going to talk about it too much here. It's just about this girl named Celie and her family who live in this magical castle. Her parents one day kind of go missing, and then people from neighboring like countries come in, and one of them is trying to like overthrow and steal the castle, and her siblings are fighting back, and the castle's kind of fighting back. And it's a very entertaining story. My kids likened it more to like a Harry Potter, like the early Harry Potters, like 1 through 3, because that's all they know, as opposed to like a Charlotte's Web or a Homer Price. There's definitely more action here, a little bit more suspense, but not like scariness, is what I would say. So it's a very wonderful read aloud for that age, which my kids are 8.5 and 7. And then we did try to pick up this book. So I'm going to show you this. So Snared, Escape to the Above by Adam J. Epstein. We didn't get very far in this only because it felt like a bit of an older middle grade, if that makes sense, because it also is fantasy based, but it's more like trolls and giant snails and all these things, and definitely with some intrigue involved. And we didn't get far just because I felt like my daughter wouldn't have really enjoyed that. My son has since gone on to find the audiobook, and he's just listening to it. I was going to try and pre-read it, but he's already taking off with it. I do like to pre-read. I like to pre-read books, mostly because my kids can be a bit sensitive with books and I want to know what's coming up. But I think I'm also going to start pre-reading some of what they will be maybe reading to themselves, so they're readers and things like that, just so that I can engage in conversation with them a bit better. So I'm trying to decide how to go about pre-reading or what my strategy will be, because I love to read, but I also love to read my books more than their books. So those two, and then what we are thinking of picking up next, because we just finished Tuesdays at the Castle a little bit ago. I just gave the kids an option of a couple books and they chose this one. So it's The Golden Bowl, a Mesopotamian adventure. So this book is part of Build Your Library Level 1, which is where I heard about it. So thanks, Emily, for the recommendation. But this book I actually have pre-read. I pre-read it like a year and a half ago when we did start Build Your Library Level 1. And it was just a little bit much for what I felt like my kids could handle, and only in the very beginning. And so what's nice about pre-reading is I know that. So like for instance, in this story, it is about two kids in the city of Ur. So we're talking the ancient city of Ur during Mesopotamia, and there's a famine in the surrounding countryside, which is where they live with their parents. And the famine is so bad that the parents have to send their two children into the city basically to survive on their own. So that part is the part that I think is a little bit much. One, that their parents are sending them away all by themselves with the idea that maybe the parents aren't even going to survive. But my plan for reading this is to kind of warn them about that aspect. And then when the story gets into the city, I really did enjoy the story because it's about the boy who takes an apprenticeship under a goldsmith, and he works for the temple. So you kind of get the temple and the goldsmith. And so it's really neat for when you're talking like culture and history. So I'm excited to pick it up, and they both really want to hear it. So it's really the perfect time to do it. We are still at the beginning of ancient history. I mean, granted, we're not at the Fertile Crescent anymore. We're in Egypt, but I still feel like it's a good book for this fall. All right, next I want to talk about my third grader. So my third grade son and his individual subjects. So math is going fine. There is nothing to report on math. He's doing Saxon and he's doing fine. It just builds on itself. It has plenty of review. He's really thriving with Saxon. So we're going to stick with it. And then as for like language arts, so reading has been going really well. So I did decide to drop most of the Abeka work that we were doing. I had Abeka grade 2 for him this year, and that included the phonics and language for Abeka, as well as the reading comprehension. And we have basically dropped the language aspect of the phonics and language. We are still going through the phonics part of it, but I'm not even having him do any of the workbooks, because the workbooks really started transitioning into like writing these sentences or writing those sentences. And I've just decided that is not the way I wanted to teach early writing. And so we're just not doing the language part, and I'm just using the teacher's guide to do all the review of the special sounds, and we are just reading. And so my goal for this year is for him to just read a bunch. He is reading twice a day out loud to me, once in the morning and once in the afternoon basically. And in the morning he is reading the readers from Sunlight. So like, for instance, we are on this one, The Pompeii Buried Alive. It's a step 4 reader, and it's just a history reader. I'm finding that he really likes the history or the nonfiction readers, as well as like fantasy books. So it's like nonfiction or fantasy for this child is really what he has been drawn to. So I'm excited for that. He's been really liking these. And so that's his morning reader, and then his afternoon reader is this one. So we're reading The Last Firehawk, The Ember Stone. This is number 1. This is a group of the Branches Scholastic books that are geared towards a grade 2 reading level, or like 1st to 3rd graders. And so these are great. He just sits with me and he reads it out loud with me. He can read this himself. He just gets a better grasp on it when he reads it out loud to me. So those are the times when we're reading together, but he also gets the privilege of reading to himself at night. And he's been picking up a couple different books. So he has another set of Branches books, which he's been using all the money he gets from mowing the lawn to pick up all of these books in the Dragon Masters series. He's very cute about it. But he reads these at night, and they're basically very much on the same level as the Firehawk books. He has just listened to these on audio, so he really knows the stories well, so it's easier for him to then take off with reading it himself. So he reads at night with those, but he also read this one in just a couple days the other week. It's just because he was so fascinated by it. Like, we have not really talked about September 11th. And so these I Survive books are really interesting. And these ones are the graphic novel ones. So he Also has never picked up graphic novels, and this is his first step into that, and he really enjoyed it. He really enjoyed the pictures, and he enjoyed the story of the boy that was surrounding the narrative of 9/11. So it was really good. He loved it. He didn't totally understand it, but he understood it enough. So I feel like this is just above his level, but he wanted to read it. He was reading it all the time, and so I'm not going to stop him. So he really liked that, so I'm going to try and get him maybe a few more of those graphic novel type ones. Okay, moving on to other parts of language arts. So the things that are going great: handwriting, typing, as well as wordly wise, so vocab. So we got typing, handwriting, and a vocabulary that he does mostly on his own. I'm kind of around to help him, but he is doing fine with those. That really helps me get to stuff with his sister, so I love all three of those things. And next, to move on to the rest of language arts, which is really what I made this video about, where I was unboxing a new curriculum, talking about kind of a different direction for spelling, grammar, and early composition. So we switched to Spelling Wisdom and Using Language Well by Simply Charlotte Mason, and it's been going really well. It's a better way to do spelling. He feels a little bit more empowered by it, and we're just using different techniques to try to help him learn how to spell or learn good tricks for that. So this has been really good so far. I like the gentle approach to language and learning, like sentence structure, punctuation, syllables. All those things are found in the book 1 of Using Language Well. So we're really enjoying that. And I'm tying this in with Sunlight, because Sunlight Language Arts also includes copywork and copywork application, which is very similar to this, where they have a passage and then they pull stuff out of that passage to talk about whether it's capitalization, syllables, imperatives. And I feel like between the two of them, it gives a really good foundation for some of those things, and it builds in a little bit of review. So I do like review. I do like programs that spiral, but I felt like Abeka was just a little too much, and this feels a little bit more appropriate for what he needs to be working on. Like, he needs to be working on learning how to read, learning how to spell, just kind of some basic things. And it's important to have those grammar elements, but I'm really drawn more to that natural approach of using good literature to pull those things out. So we're using kind of those two programs intermixed. And then, like I said, I'm also using Sunlight Language Art, and I'm specifically using more of the creative expression. And I have shifted what I'm doing with that, because I have often expressed to you guys that I struggle with the creative expression because I just didn't know how to teach it to him, to get him to tell me what I wanted. And I feel like what I have accepted is the fact that I need to work very closely with him on all of these things. I need to give him examples. I need to talk about, well, how would I structure this paragraph? How would I organize my thoughts? So I'm treating this kind of early composition. We're using the creative expression section of Sunlight, but we're also doing a lot more oral narration, which is more of a Charlotte Mason approach, but it's the same idea, you guys. It's that idea of trying to organize thoughts and then organize those thoughts to bring them onto paper and to make them make sense. And within Sunlight, I'll give you an example. Yeah, here we go. Of his last paragraph, we did an expository paragraph where he decided on the topic of how to fish. And it's great because the way Sunlight has it set up, the first day is a lot of brainstorming. What I tend to do these days is I type it for him, and then we put it in his big notebook here, his 3rd grade notebook. We just glue it in here. And so the first day we did a lot of brainstorming of like what he wants to talk about in this paragraph where he explains how to fish. And then the next day I have like draft 1, and literally what I do is we talk about it ahead of time. Like that next day we'll come back, we'll remind him of the things we talked about in the brainstorming session. Then I will talk about how to set up a paragraph. Like, you want to make sure your reader knows what you're trying to explain to them. So I do a lot of coaching on the front end so that he doesn't feel kind of like lost, which I feel like was before. I'm like, okay, go, I'm ready. And now I'm trying to guide him a little bit more on the front end. And so then I just type what he says, exactly what he says. I try hard not to like adultify what he says and just like fix it, even though it's almost a habit. But I try to write exactly what he says, and then we go back through it. And so that's what this second part here is. I have like final draft. I know you can't see that closely, but what we do is I copy the first draft right next to it, and then we'll just go through it. We'll kind of go line by line, and we'll talk through how it sounds. It's like, does this sound like a good way to intro your paragraph? Do you think your readers are going to know what's going on? And then he can think a little bit more. He's like, oh no, I'd add this. And then we'll read through it and it'll be like, well, do you even need this sentence? Is this like a lot of extra detail? And so I'll give him an example of like, if I were writing a paragraph about how to paint and I said it like this, and I'd give an example of like a complete tangent, I'd be like, how does that sound? He's like, no, that doesn't sound good. I was like, well, maybe we could simplify. And so we'll work together on simplifying and just working together on writing this little paragraph. And it has worked so much better, you guys. One, he is not frustrated as much with me anymore. I'm feeling so much better about that. So basically, to put it in a nutshell, I have learned that I need to teach him more oral narration. So we're doing that with a lot of science and history. So that's part of our day anyway. But then that same idea we're bringing into creative expression, that organizing, but then I'm using a lot of that like partnership in writing where I've just decided we are working together. We are a team. There's no like me, you sort of thing. We're a team and we're going to write the best paragraph we can. And at first that's off-putting. It's like, well, I don't need to write a paragraph in 3rd grade, but I have found that he lights up more when it's a we effort. He engages more. He has more creativity, all of these things because of the we effort. Because I had to table the idea of the fact that I'm taking over. I don't, which I'm not. I'm partnering. So anyway, that was a long explanation for his language arts. But one other thing I wanted to mention, which I mentioned this in my past video when I was doing my planning day, is that I'm thinking about speeding up how fast he's doing his Sunlight language arts, because I have him in level 2 because that's pretty much where he tested in. But I'm thinking of kind of skipping over some of the materials so that I can get to level 3 language arts for Sunlight, only because it has what's called the diamond notes, which is a way for teaching paragraph formation that Sunlight uses, which I think is really clever. And I want to give it a try with my son because I think it'll be a good tool, and it'll also help me gauge whether we should just stick with like oral narration plus Sunlight creative expression, or if he needs a little bit more structure, like maybe an IEW or something like that. And I wouldn't do it this year. It's more for kind of the future. So I want to make sure we can get to at least how Sunlight teaches through the diamond notes to gauge him before I make that decision as to, do we want to give him a little bit more structure next year along with the oral narrations, or is Sunlight going to fit the bill for him? So that is also what I'm working on with him. But you guys, I feel like I've been talking forever about him. I'm sorry. Let me move on to 2nd grade. I feel like I never talk too much about my daughter because a lot of the stuff that my son is doing, my daughter is doing. But she's a little different. This is the year for her to work on her phonics, and she's doing Abeka with all the worksheets and language as well as letters and sounds. So she's doing the whole phonics deal for Abeka, and it's going well. She even has all the readers. We have really liked grade 1 Abeka. I actually just made a video about my tips for using Abeka. So she's thriving under that. She's doing really well. She's doing handwriting, and then she's also doing the Sunlight language arts, and I have shifted her in the same way as we are really working on it together. And then we're doing the copywork and the copywork application because she doesn't have a separate grammar. She doesn't have a separate spelling. We're just focusing on reading. And then we're doing some of those copywork exercises as well as beginning writing exercises with her. So she's doing really well, you guys. I feel like she actually is my kiddo that sometimes will push back with a little bit of an attitude. But we've had a little bit of a talk where we talk about having like a happy heart when it comes to homeschool. Makes homeschool more enjoyable and it goes faster. And she has found that to be true. And so every time she comes a little bit grumpy, like, I don't want to do this, I'm always like, do you remember about having a happy heart? And she's like, okay. And so she just kind of tries to bring a better attitude, and it usually works out. So I've been loving that about her. And then for my twins, so my preschoolers, like I said, they go to preschool twice a week, but we are also using the Abeka K4. So we've been using it for enough time now. I think we're on like lesson in the 30s. We're in the 30s somewhere. And we've been doing a lot of work with the vowels and the vowel sounds. And you guys, this is challenging for them. Like, we also have been doing numbers, and they're great at numbers. They can count, they can recognize numbers, they can match numbers. It's just, they're fine with their numbers. Their vowel sounds are harder, but really vowel sounds are hard. I mean, the difference between a short E and a short I, it's very nuanced, the difference. And so it's harder for them. And we've moved into trying to learn blending. Like, we'll take a small like T and be like T, T, Te, Ta, Ta, and it's just a little hard for them, but they're doing really well. We're also doing a lot of the Sunlight like pre-K and preschool programs, and they're just loving all the books. So I'm seeing my battery is starting to flash, so I'm going to wrap this up here. And I'm sorry if this has been very long. I just love chatting with you guys about what's going on. So let me know down below what's going on in your homeschool. How's September gone? Are you guys settling into a good routine? Is it feeling more manageable at this time of the year? So let me know all that below. I love to hear from you guys. But otherwise, I will see you in the next homeschool video. All right, guys, take care.